Reuters is launching a project examining the legacy of slavery in America. What does uncovering this history about our families, what does it do?
Reuters correspondent Tom Lasseter began to trace his family's lineage in the spring of 2022, driven by a memory of his grandfather.
I was with my grandfather visiting Forsyth County, Georgia, where I am right now, and looking at a farmhouse which my family once owned, the farmhouse standing behind me. And as we walked around the grounds, we passed an old water well. And my grandfather gestured at it in an offhand way and said, "The slaves built that." We didn't stop to discuss that. There was no pause, no moment. We just kept walking. I moved back to the United States in the summer of 2020 after about 17 years living abroad as a foreign correspondent. And that summer in Washington, D.C., watching coverage of the protests that followed the death of George Floyd, I thought back to that memory of being on this land with my grandfather, him pointing at that well and saying the slaves built that. And I wondered, had my family enslaved people? If so, who were they?
A last will from Lasseter's great-great-great-great-grandfather George Julian revealed the names of 9 enslaved people that would be kept by the family. Among them, 2 people named Dick and Lot. Lasseter's search for their descendants crossed a history drenched with blood, a campaign of terror and lynchings after the 1912 election of Woodrow Wilson that drove out all but a few dozen of the more than 1,000 Black people who lived in Forsyth County. A chat with an Atlanta-based research assistant who was tracing descendants of people who fled Forsyth led Lasseter to a meeting with Elon Osby, whose grandmother, Ida Bagley, was born to Richard and Charlotte Julian. Based on a review of 1860 and 1870 census forms, and a set of 1907 documents later filled out by Richard and Charlotte Julian's children, which gave what they referred to as slave names used by Richard and Charlotte, they were either the Dick and Lot mentioned in the will of George Julian, or they were enslaved by George's brother, Bailey.
It makes people real now, you know. My mother never mentioned their names. She didn't tell me what her grandfather's name was other than Julian. And I think my brother learned that from my aunt.
When Osby's grandmother and her family fled Forsyth after the carnage of 1912, they left behind at least 60 acres of land, she said, and made their way to Atlanta.
One thing I think about is imagining the fear, you know, that they must have felt. And it's unimaginable. You know, you are not only trying to save your life, but more important, you're trying to save the lives of your children. And just all of the things they had to leave.
Osby's family would be pushed off their land again in the late 1930s and early 1940s in Atlanta, after nearby white residents petitioned the county to raise Bagley Park, a settlement of formerly enslaved people. She is now a member of the Fulton County Reparations Task Force, a group that advises the county board and has sponsored research on what happened at Bagley Park.
There was a time when I didn't feel that restitution or reparations was necessary. I just want somebody to acknowledge it and say, you know, we're sorry. But I have come to realize or come to feel that we do need to receive something in the form of restitution.